There is a way to control a woman's attention without saying a single word. No lines, no tricks, no performance. And the reason most men never discover it is because it has nothing to do with doing more. It has everything to do with removing noise. Attention is not something you ask for, it's something that locks on to stability. And most men are unstable without realizing it. They shift emotionally, they react too quickly, they reveal too much, they try to steer outcomes, and every one of those actions leaks attention away from them. Here's the truth. A woman's attention is controlled by her nervous system, not her logic. She doesn't choose where her attention stays. Her body decides first. And the body is drawn to what feels grounded, unresolved, and emotionally solid. Most men think attention comes from stimulation. It doesn't. Stimulation creates spikes. Spikes fade. Attention stays where there is gravity. Gravity comes from emotional stillness. The man who controls attention without words is not trying to be interesting. He is undisturbed. Undisturbed by silence, undisturbed by uncertainty, undisturbed by outcome. That undisturbed state creates a psychological grip because attention sticks to what does not move. Most men move constantly. They check reactions, they adjust tone, they chase engagement, and chasing pushes attention away. Here's something most men misunderstand. Attention is not pulled by effort, it is pulled by containment. A man who contains his emotions feels dense. Dense energy holds attention. Light, scattered energy repels it. This is why some men can sit quietly and still dominate a room. Not because they are loud, but because they are centered. Centering is rare, and rarity captures attention instantly. Another uncomfortable truth is this. When you speak too soon, you give attention away. When you react too fast, you surrender position. When you explain yourself, you dissolve mystery. Mystery is not about hiding, it's about not leaking. Most men leak attention before it ever has a chance to settle. They overcommunicate, they over-emote, they over-invest, and in doing so, they lose grip. A woman's attention locks onto men who feel internally complete, not perfect, complete. Completion feels calm, calm feels safe, and safety allows attention to stay instead of scanning for threats. Here's where it gets deeper. The strongest attention trigger is unresolved emotional presence. Not tension created through games, but tension created through restraint. Restraint signals self-control. Self-control signals power. Power holds attention without force. This is why women often say they feel drawn to men they can't explain. Not because those men are confusing, but because they are not transparent emotionally. Transparency too early feels flat. Depth without exposure feels magnetic. Another truth men avoid is this. When you speak too soon, you give attention away. When you react too fast, you surrender position. When you explain yourself, you dissolve mystery. Mystery is not about hiding, it's about not leaking. Most men leak attention before it ever has a chance to settle. They overcommunicate, they over-emote, they over-invest. And in doing so, they lose grip. A woman's attention locks onto men who feel internally complete, not perfect, complete. Completion feels calm. Calm feels safe. And safety allows attention to stay instead of scanning for threats. Here's where it gets deeper. The strongest attention trigger is unresolved emotional presence. Not tension created through games, but tension created through restraint. Restraint signals self-control. Self-control signals power. Power holds attention without force. This is why women often say they feel drawn to men they can't explain. Not because those men are confusing, but because they are not transparent emotionally. Transparency too early feels flat. Depth without exposure feels magnetic. Another truth men avoid is Beck's. Attention follows the man who does not need it. Neediness is loud, and loud things are ignored quickly. The man who does not need attention becomes noticeable because attention flows toward independence. Another layer is how silence works. Silence is not absence, Silence is space. Space forces awareness. When a man is comfortable in silence, her mind fills the gap, and the mind is where attention deepens. Most men fear silence because silence exposes need. The man who doesn't fear it controls the emotional tempo. Tempo control equals attention control. Another thing most men don't realize is that attention is lost when you seek certainty. Seeking certainty signals insecurity. Insecurity makes attention restless. The man who can sit comfortably without knowing what comes next becomes a psychological anchor. Anchors hold attention. Another uncomfortable truth is this: trying to impress pushes attention away, because impressing is asking, and asking lowers position. The man who controls attention is not asking for anything, he is observing. And observation without urgency feels powerful. This is why attention sticks to men who seem slightly detached, not cold, detached from outcome. Outcome detachment removes pressure. Pressure suffocates attention. Another layer is emotional economy. Men who give everything at once become invisible. Men who give selectively become memorable. Attention respects boundaries even when it doesn't like them. Another truth is that attention is directional. It flows toward emotional leadership. Emotional leadership is not telling her what to feel. It's not being moved by what she feels. If her mood dictates your state, you lose attention. If your state remains steady, attention locks. This is the psychological grip. Not control through dominance, control through non-reactivity. Another detail most men miss is that attention stays where curiosity lives. Curiosity needs space. Space needs restraint. Restraint requires self-trust. Men who don't trust themselves rush. Rushing kills curiosity. Another uncomfortable realization is this: you cannot fake this. Women detect incongruence instantly. If you act calm but feel anxious, attention slips. If you act detached but crave reaction, attention dissolves. The grip only forms when your internal state matches your behavior. This is why attention control is not a tactic, it's a state. Once you enter this state, attention behaves differently around you. She looks longer, she listens deeper, she checks in without knowing why. Not because you said anything, but because your presence altered the emotional environment. And this is just the foundation, because once you understand how attention is held without words, everything else becomes secondary. Conversation, timing, action, all of it sits on top of this. And without this, nothing sticks. This is where attention first stops wandering and starts settling quietly, instinctively, without effort. This is where the psychological grip begins. Once attention settles, the dynamic subtly reverses. She begins adjusting instead of you. Not because you demanded it, but because attention follows stability. Most men think attention is something you create. It isn't. It's something you stop disrupting. The biggest disruption is emotional reaction. Reaction breaks gravity. Gravity holds attention. When you react to her mood, her tone, her availability, attention loosens. When you remain steady, attention tightens. This is where most men fail. They feel a shift and rush to correct it. They text more, they explain intentions, they increase effort. And the moment effort spikes, attention drops. Because effort signals need. Need signals instability. Instability repels attention. Another important truth is this: attention does not stay with what is predictable. Predictability relaxes the nervous system too much. Relaxation without tension causes drift. The man who controls attention remains internally consistent, but externally unpredictable. His values are clear. His reactions are not guaranteed. That uncertainty keeps attention engaged. Another layer is emotional pacing. Men who rush attention lose it. Men who allow attention to come and go naturally keep it. This is why clinging destroys attraction. Clinging collapses space. Space is where attention breathes. Another deep mechanism is nonverbal permission. When you don't rush to fill silence, you give her nervous system permission to lean in. When you don't chase validation, you invite curiosity. Curiosity holds attention longer than stimulation ever could. Another subtle truth is how women sense emotional self-sufficiency. If your life feels full without her, attention sharpens. If your energy orbits her, attention dulls. Orbiting behavior makes you predictable. Predictability is forgettable. Another factor is emotional contrast. Men who treat every interaction the same feel flat. Men who vary emotional access without explanation feel interesting. Not through games, through natural rhythm. This rhythm keeps attention tuned. Another uncomfortable truth is this: attention increases when you're willing to disengage without resentment. Resentment leaks need. Calm disengagement signals strength. Strength stabilizes attention. Another key is how you handle moments of distance. Distance is a test, not of loyalty, of self-regulation. Most men panic during distance. They seek reassurance, they reach out, they collapse boundaries. The man who remains calm during distance becomes the focal point because attention gravitates toward emotional safety. Safety does not mean availability, it means predictable internal control. Another truth men resist is that attention does not require constant contact. Constant contact creates saturation. Saturation kills curiosity. Scarcity without manipulation restores it. Another deep layer is eye contact and presence. Presence is not staring. Presence is being where you are without performing. When your attention is not trying to manage hers, hers begins managing itself around you. Another thing men misunderstand is how attention responds to indifference versus non-attachment. Indifference feels cold. Non-attachment feels grounded. Grounded men feel safe to focus on. Another mechanism is emotional containment. When emotions rise, most men either suppress or spill. Both extremes disrupt attention. Containment means feeling without leaking. Leaking draws attention away from you. Containment draws it toward you. Another truth is this: attention follows the man who does not try to hold it. Holding implies fear. Fear collapses presence. Presence is the real grip. Another subtle factor is timing. Responding too fast gives attention away. Responding too slow feels artificial. Responding naturally signals internal alignment. Alignment holds attention effortlessly. Another uncomfortable realization is that attention is lost when you ask for it emotionally. Questions like, "Are we okay? Did I do something wrong? Why are you distant?" These questions place attention outside yourself. The man who controls attention looks inward first. Another layer is emotional dignity. Dignity is how you behave when you could chase but don't. Dignity creates respect. Respect anchors attention. Another important truth is this: attention is sustained by emotional trust, not reassurance. Trust comes from consistency over time. Reassurance feels temporary. Another factor is how women respond to men who enjoy attention but don't depend on it. Enjoyment is light. Dependence is heavy. Attention stays with lightness. Another uncomfortable truth is that attention often intensifies when you stop monitoring it. Monitoring creates tension. Tension leaks. Another deep realization is that attention responds to emotional leadership. Leadership here means holding your emotional state regardless of hers. Not dominance, not control, stability. This stability feels rare, and rarity locks attention without effort. This is why attention control feels effortless when done right, because you're not controlling anything. You're simply not interfering.
And when you stop interfering, attention behaves differently around you. It slows down, it stays, it settles, without being asked, without being forced. This is the shift most men never experience. But once you do, attention stops feeling fragile. It becomes something that follows you naturally, because stability is magnetic, and attention always moves toward what feels solid. At this stage, the most important shift happens internally. You stop trying to manage attention, and attention starts managing itself around you. This is where most men get confused, because nothing traumatic changes on the surface. There's no big reaction, no sudden declaration, no obvious sign. Instead, there is a subtle tightening of focus. She checks your reactions. She notices your silence. She becomes aware of your presence even when you are not engaging. That awareness is attention consolidating. Another truth most men never realize is that attention is not held by stimulation, but by contrast. When everything is available, nothing feels valuable. When access is calm but limited, attention sharpens. The man who controls attention understands contrast intuitively. He doesn't overexpose himself emotionally. He doesn't disappear either. He exists at his own pace. That pace becomes the reference point. Another deep mechanism is how women respond to men who don't emotionally chase alignment. Most men try to sync emotions constantly. They adjust mood, they mirror energy, they match tone. This feels cooperative, but it weakens attention. The man who remains himself regardless of emotional fluctuation creates polarity. Polarity sustains focus. Another uncomfortable truth is this: attention follows men who are comfortable being slightly misunderstood. Misunderstanding creates curiosity. Curiosity fuels focus. The man who rushes to clarify everything removes curiosity. And without curiosity, attention drifts. Another layer is how attention responds to emotional completeness. If you feel whole, attention feels safe to land. If you feel incomplete, attention feels pressure. Pressure pushes attention away. Another important detail is how women sense internal tension in men. Not sexual tension, emotional tension. Tension caused by wanting something. Wanting creates pull. Pull creates instability. Instability dissolves attention. The man who wants nothing from the moment feels grounded. Grounded energy holds attention. Another factor is emotional pacing during interaction. Men who try to escalate attention lose it. Men who let attention deepen naturally keep it. Depth cannot be rushed. Another subtle truth is that attention responds to nonverbal boundaries. Boundaries not spoken. Boundaries lived. When you don't overreact, when you don't over-explain, when you don't overgive. These non-actions signal strength. Strength stabilizes attention. Another layer most men overlook is how attention reacts to emotional independence during success. When things are going well, many men lean harder. They open more, they invest more, they chase momentum. This collapses the dynamic. The man who stays steady when things go well becomes unforgettable, because consistency under success feels rare. Another uncomfortable realization is this: attention grows when you do not attempt to hold it. Holding implies fear. Fear is felt immediately. The man who trusts his presence does not grip, he allows. Allowance keeps attention relaxed but engaged. Another important point is how women respond to emotional authority. Not authority over them, authority over yourself. If your emotional state remains intact regardless of external input, attention orients toward you. Because self-directed men feel safe to focus on. Another mechanism is how attention responds to emotional minimalism. Saying less, reacting less, doing less. Minimalism removes noise. Noise scatters attention. Silence focuses it. Another truth men resist is that attention deepens when you stop trying to be impressive. Impressing is effort. Effort reveals insecurity. Insecurity destabilizes attention. Presence without performance feels powerful. Another layer is how attention responds to time. Men who are in a hurry leak need. Men who are patient signal abundance. Abundance calms attention. Another uncomfortable truth is that attention often increases when you are okay with losing it. Because fear of loss is what drives most mistakes. The man who is okay without attention paradoxically becomes the one attention sticks to. Another subtle dynamic is emotional consistency, not predictability, consistency of core. Your values don't shift, your emotional center doesn't move, but your availability is not guaranteed. That balance keeps attention engaged without anxiety. Another key realization is this: attention is not something you control directly. You control your internal state, and attention responds automatically. This is why all external tactics eventually fail, because attention doesn't respond to behavior, it responds to being. Another deep truth is that once attention locks on to emotional stability, it resists distraction. Other stimuli become background noise, not because you demanded focus, but because focus found a center. This is the psychological grip, not dominance, not manipulation, stability in a world of emotional noise. And once you become that stable point, attention doesn't need to be chased, it naturally returns, again and again, without explanation, without effort. This is the moment when you realize attention was never about words. It was about who you are when nothing is happening. And most men never develop that state. But once you do, attention behaves differently around you. It stays closer, it lingers longer, and it becomes much harder to pull away. Not because you held it, but because it chose to stay.
As this grip forms, something subtle but important starts happening in her behavior. She begins checking in emotionally, not through words, through attention shifts. She notices when you don't react. She feels when you don't rush. She senses when your emotional center doesn't move. This creates a quiet imbalance, and imbalance is where attention sharpens. Most men misunderstand imbalance. They think imbalance is dominance. It's not. It's self-sufficiency. The man who controls attention without words does not need emotional confirmation to stay grounded, and that absence of need becomes the loudest signal in the room. Another layer most men never recognize is how attention reacts to emotional friction, not conflict, friction. The resistance created when she cannot immediately read you, when she cannot predict your emotional response, when her usual signals don't move you. That friction generates focus, because the mind wants resolution, and when resolution isn't offered, attention stays engaged. Another uncomfortable truth is that attention increases when you don't emotionally reward every move. Immediate reward trains expectation. Expectation dulls focus. Delayed emotional response keeps attention alert, not through games, through natural pacing. Another key point is how women respond to men who don't emotionally anchor themselves to interaction outcomes. If the conversation goes well, you remain the same. If it stalls, you remain the same. If it ends, you remain the same. That emotional neutrality feels powerful because it signals inner abundance. Abundance removes pressure. Pressure repels attention. Another layer is how attention responds to emotional honesty without disclosure. You can be authentic without revealing everything. You can be present without explaining yourself. You can be warm without being accessible. This balance creates intrigue. Another uncomfortable truth is that men often lose attention when they try to be emotionally fair. They match energy, they mirror tone, they try to stay balanced,
But balance achieved through reaction is not balance, it's compliance. The man who controls attention balances himself first. Others adjust naturally. Another subtle dynamic is how attention responds to non-defensiveness. Defensiveness leaks insecurity. Insecurity scatters attention. When you don't defend, explain, or justify, attention consolidates because certainty feels grounded. Another thing most men miss is how attention responds to emotional patience during uncertainty. When there is ambiguity, most men rush to remove it. They clarify, they define, they secure. And in doing so, they remove the very tension holding attention. The man who lets ambiguity exist calmly becomes the focal point. Another layer is emotional congruence. If your body, tone, and pace align with your inner state, attention trusts you. If there's mismatch, attention drifts. Women sense mismatch instantly. Congruence is magnetic. Another uncomfortable truth is this: attention grows when you stop trying to be liked. Liking-seeking behavior feels soft. Softness without grounding loses grip. Grounded warmth holds it. Another factor is emotional rhythm. Men who talk continuously flatten attention. Men who allow pauses create depth. Pauses invite reflection. Reflection deepens focus. Another deep layer is how attention responds to emotional selectivity. When your attention is selective, hers becomes focused. When your attention is everywhere, hers scatters. Another truth is that attention respects boundaries even when attraction resists them. Boundaries signal self-respect. Self-respect anchors attention. Another subtle shift happens when you stop filling emotional gaps. If she pulls back, you don't fill it. If silence appears, you don't chase it. If distance arises, you don't collapse. This restraint creates gravity. Gravity pulls attention back. Another uncomfortable realization is that attention cannot be demanded. It can only be allowed. Allowing requires confidence without display. Another layer is how attention responds to emotional humility, not self-deprecation. Humility as calm certainty. You don't need to assert value, you live it. Living value feels stable. Stability holds attention. Another truth is that attention intensifies when you treat interaction as optional. Optional does not mean careless, it means non-dependent. Dependency is loud. Optionality is quiet. Quiet draws focus. Another important point is how attention responds to internal stillness during emotional highs. When excitement rises, most men escalate. They push forward. They increase effort. This destabilizes attention. The man who stays grounded during excitement becomes unforgettable because consistency under stimulation feels rare. Another layer is emotional gravity over time. Short-term attention can be gained through excitement. Long-term attention requires stability. Stability is built through repeated non-reactivity. Another uncomfortable truth is that once attention locks on to stability, it resists chaos. Drama loses pole. Noise loses power. The calm center becomes the reference point. This is the psychological grip most men never experience, not because it's complicated, but because it requires letting go of control. Letting go of outcome, letting go of validation. And that letting go is exactly what gives attention something to hold on to. This is where attention stops being something you manage and starts being something that orbits you, quietly, naturally, without effort. This is when you realize that the strongest presence in the room is not the loudest, it's the one that doesn't need to move. And that presence keeps attention exactly where it is, right there. At the deepest level,
This is why controlling attention without words feels almost invisible when it works, because nothing is being forced. There is no push, no pull, no demand. There is only emotional gravity. And gravity doesn't announce itself. It simply keeps things in place. Most men believe attention is something fragile that must be maintained, so they manage it, they monitor it, they protect it, they react to it, and in doing so, they destroy it. The man who holds attention does the opposite. He does not manage attention, he manages himself, his reactions, his pace, his emotional center. Once that center is stable, attention naturally aligns around it. This is the part that changes everything, because once you stop chasing attention, you stop fearing its loss. And fear of loss is what causes most men to collapse. Collapse looks like over-communication, over-explaining, over-investing, overreacting. All signals of instability. Instability scatters attention. Stability anchors it. Another truth most men never confront is this: attention is not loyal to effort. It is loyal to clarity and calm. The calmer your internal state, the clearer your presence feels. And clarity is rare in an emotionally noisy world. That rarity pulls focus. Another uncomfortable realization is that attention does not stay where there is emotional bargaining. Negotiation feels weak. Certainty feels solid. The man who does not negotiate his emotional position becomes the reference point. Others adjust around him. Another layer of this is how attention responds to emotional boundaries that are never spoken. When you don't chase what pulls away, when you don't reward what disrespects, when you don't explain what you stand for, your boundaries become felt. And felt boundaries command attention more than words ever could. Another deep truth is that once attention is anchored to your presence, words become secondary. What you say matters less than how still you are while saying nothing. This is why silence becomes powerful, not because it's a tactic, but because it reflects internal order. Internal order feels safe. Safety allows attention to rest. Another uncomfortable truth is that men who lose attention often lose it the moment they try to secure it. Security-seeking behavior feels like fear. Fear breaks the grip. The man who is okay without attention becomes the one attention returns to, again and again. Another important realization is that attention does not respond to perfection. It responds to self-trust. A man who trusts himself does not rush to prove value. He allows others to feel it. Feeling lasts longer than explanation. Another layer is how attention responds to emotional sovereignty. When no one else controls your emotional state, no one else controls your focus. And when your focus is stable, others orient toward it. This is why attention becomes effortless once you stop outsourcing your emotional regulation. Another uncomfortable truth is this: most men never experience this grip because it requires giving up the need to be chosen. The moment you no longer need selection, selection begins happening naturally. Not because you demanded it, but because independence is attractive. Another layer is how attention responds to consistency under pressure. When tension rises, most men change. When tension rises and you don't, attention locks, because consistency under stress signals strength. Strength holds focus. Another deep realization is that attention control is not something you turn on, it's something you stop interfering with. Once you stop leaking emotion, attention has a place to settle. Once you stop chasing response, attention returns. Once you stop needing validation, attention sharpens. This is why the grip feels psychological, because it operates beneath thought, beneath logic, at the level of nervous systems. Now, if this video helped you understand how attention is held without words, there is one video you should watch next, because attention control is only one side of the dynamic.
The other side explains what happens when emotional leverage is reversed and how men unknowingly give up control without realizing it. That's exactly what I break down in my video called Dark Psychology: How Women Manipulate Men Without Them Knowing. That video shows how emotional leverage forms, why reaction creates control, and how awareness dissolves manipulation completely. Watch that next, because once you understand both attention and leverage, you stop being pulled emotionally and you start becoming the point everything moves around. Not through force, not through tactics, but through emotional stability. And when you reach that state, attention no longer feels fragile. It becomes inevitable, quiet, steady, unshakable. That is the psychological grip. And once you have it, nothing needs to be said.